people will never necessarily remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
It's not about telling people what to do. It's about sharing the experience, the values.
Founders still tell me that they still feel very alone.
Don't assume that someone over there is going to give you a job or a contract or something.
The best leaders in the world are the best listeners. Typically in meetings, they always go last because they want to take in what everybody else is saying. Hello, Barbara. How are you?
I'm fine, Adrienne. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Because I haven't had the opportunity to do this podcast with you, so I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly.
Yes, 100%. You know, people always say Adrienne, Adriana. I always go back to the Rocky movie. Adrienne. That's exactly how you pronounce it. So hopefully you
Okay.
won't be yelling at me. I'm just kidding. But, you know, that's how it's pronounced, but many different ways. So it's all good. Barbara, I am so excited about our podcast. We've been trying to do this for some time. You are an extremely busy lady, as we all are, but I have such immense respect for you, and you have been a mentor of mine for many, many years. I absolutely love and adore you. For those of our audience who doesn't know you, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do? I mean, we've got so much to cover, but sort of what you do today, and then we're going to get into your amazing story.
Okay. So today I'm um, I'm I'm the CEO and founder of two companies. One being Grow Your Biz, which provides advisory boards for women who want to take their business to the next growth level, and that we're national and global. And we pivoted from in person to COVID, during COVID, to do
Mm,
virtual, but we were actually doing virtual even before COVID because
wow.
we always wanted to make sure that women of every stage of their business have a chance not just to meet the women in their community, but women around the world. So it's lovely when we can bring somebody from the UK or the Netherlands with somebody in Vancouver, BC or Toronto. So,
There is.
so Grow Your Biz helps women take their business to the next growth level. Also, at the same time, I started a not-for-profit side of Grow Your Biz, and it's the Institute Association for, again, helping women. And we do that through our very well known Accelerate conference. And our Accelerate conference is what I'm deep into right now. And I know you're going to be one of our speakers, so I'm delighted to do this with you. And that will be April 24th to 26th. And it isn't an ordinary conference. And I'm just reaching for something because I want to get the words correct. Um, it it isn't just a business conference, it's a thought leadership conference because what I try to do is bring together really dedicated speakers who are they continue to innovate, they inspire and they influence our thinking beyond the norm. So it's not just about, oh, I need to know what the best accounting package is. Oh, I need to get access to finance. Although those are all important, it
Hmm.
is also about just pushing it a little bit further. Become a, I want visionaries. I want people who really see things in a different way. So we always include megatrends. What's the new thing happening? So April 24th to 26th in beautiful Vancouver, we will be doing the Accelerate conference. And I was very nervous about doing the first one in 2015. But out of that, we decided that what was important because people, especially not not just women, but people did not understand what SDGs stood for. And that stands for Sustainable Development Goals. And I was able to put together in 2015 the first plenary on that, what an SDG is. I brought to my conference people like Amanda Ellis and Elise Nelson and Mahmoud Mahildan, who is still the senior vice president for all of the United Nations, who
Wow.
deals with the SDGs. And he had never been to a women's conference. He didn't want to come to Vancouver. He's an Egypt. He's a big Egyptian guy, and And in the end, that we convinced him, and we said, "You got to understand that women need to know. That's the mega trend. That's what we're looking forward to." Because at that time, people only knew about ending poverty, and that was a 2000 goal. Well, now there's 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Well, he said, "Well, I'll fly in and I'll fly out." He did that on his own dime. Came from Cairo, went back to, right? He was amazed at how many of the 320 women that attended our conference in 2015 actually were involved in an SDG.
Wow.
So as a result of that, we, again, I'm saying these things because one of the threads in my business is always about building relationships. And
Mm.
as a result of that relationship we built in 2015, we then started with a group of other people, the UN, Vital Voices, Mount Ellis. We started the We Empower UNSD Challenge, which is now going into, we always do it in 2021 or in New York. And the last one we did was the first time um, a woman from BC actually won from Canada. So
Oh.
I'm saying that because those are all integrated into my core of what my businesses have always been about.
And
So
I love that. And Barbara, just to interject, everything you're saying about your businesses and I mean, I know you, people love and adore you for many different reasons, but I want to go back to the fact that that is the core, I think, of who you are personally as well. Because I'm going to keep bringing it back to personal for you. And the reason is, and I want to get your take on this, because I think we're all going back to our grassroots, which I feel is so important. And that is that people are buying and corporations are buying into founders and into people versus into the beautiful logos all of our, founders and entrepreneurs have. So
yes,
people want to get to know you. And I know you, and I know you are a very kind, giving, generous, motivating, empowering woman. What is something that people don't know about you personally that you might want to share for the first time on this podcast? For example, you might say, well, something people don't know about me is I love to cook, or I rescue dogs, or just something that somebody doesn't know about you.
I don't know if they don't know this about me, but I want to always take the time when I go into a new community, a new country. I want to talk to the people that are voiceless. And by
Mm,
that, I mean, I don't want to just spend time with the people that I've been invited to go there with. I want to walk along that beach. I want to sit on that park bench. I want to go into the shops that no one would necessarily go to. And I want to know the people behind those little tiny places that I meet. Because to me, they have a story. They have a
yes.
story. I grew up in a small town. I grew up, I was on my own since I was 14. I knew
Wow.
that I did not, I wanted to do something with my life. I wasn't going to be, the expression, I didn't want to be I didn't want to be barefoot and pregnant. I
Yeah.
knew I
Oh,
wanted
do I know that
education.
expression? Oh, yes.
Right.
And,
And I knew that I had to reach out. So everybody has something wonderful to say. Everybody.
and that's
Everybody has a
part of your
golden nugget.
legacy. Yes, and
Well,
I think that's the legacy that you wanted, that you've built, is that you are giving a voice to the voiceless, but also you are taking the time to get to know people, like you said, that maybe wouldn't necessarily be in the realm or in your circle, which is, is a
yeah.
gift and just is so incredible of you to begin with. And so, sort of going back to what you started to say, you were 14 and alone. Ha- okay, do tell. I know we only have, a
Oh,
small amount of
okay.
time, but I love your story, and I know everybody else that's listening will draw such inspiration from, your story and your journey and where you've been
Yeah.
and where you are now.
So our family in this little town had a boarding home. And I was 11 when my mother died, and I had three sisters and a brother, and I was the youngest. And the older sister had been married, got married at 16, because that was the Dolly Parton kind of ways, and the Loretta Will. Uh, Um,
Yes.
I can't even think of her name right now. And she just, they got married young. And
Yes.
I fell in love with one of our boarders who was 18 and he worked for the CN. Well, after we started going together, but now I'm 17 and he needed to get out of this town because he was working for the CN. He was a surveyor. So he said, I'm going west. And I said, I can only go west and marry you if I get my education. I want to continue. So the place has to have a university. And that was a story in itself because the university that I applied to, I had the grades. Academically, I was sound. I A plus all the
Yeah.
way, but we didn't have any money. We had nothing. We had the clothes on our back, and that was about it. And
Mm.
so it was like, you know what? I can do this. So I had three jobs. I worked in a bakery, I
Mm-hmm.
sold Avon, and I worked in a chicken hatchery. And it was
Wow.
like I was going to make money. And I remember that SFU turned me down on the first student loan that I applied for, which was
Mm.
$5,000. And they said, well, if it was your husband getting the loan, it would be different. And I just went, oh my God. So even back in 1969, there was prejudice against women getting
Sure
ahead.
was. Sure was.
So, so that was how I got my university degree. I started teaching. I then got a master's in counseling psychology. And then the crash came in 1980s. The crash came, and it was like, what was I going to do? Because I quit the college because I went, oh, I'm going to start my own consulting firm. I have a master's in counseling psychology now, and I got noticed for my work in home-based businesses, and I was working out of a home, and it was like home-based businesses were illegal, and there were two people in the States that I read about. One was Barbara Breivik in Naperville, Illinois, and I wonder what she does today. But she started forming home-based business associations. And in Canada, we have so many rural places. We have little
Mm.
towns that have populations of 300, 400, 1,000. What was going to happen to them when the economy went down? Interest rates went up to 20, in some cases, 26%. So that was the beginning of my very first business, was to start putting together programs, how to start a home-based business. How do you market your product when you're in a northern community, in a rural area? So the government of BC at the time, and I can't even, it was a Socred government, asked me what I could do to help them. And I said, well, they have these beautiful products. Everything I'm wearing, everything you see in the background of my house is from a home-based business at one time, even the couches and the furniture, everything. And I said, they're making things. They're making things. So that's how the Uniquely program started.
Mm.
So I took the risk and whatever, listen, I had nothing at the time. And I said, you support this one trade show and we called it the BC Creative Arts Show.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that these people had to figure out, how do they take their products to the next growth level? What do they have to do to design and pricing? And how do they go from instant gratification of selling their product, their jewelry, whatever it is they're wearing, to a global stage, to a global uh, audience? And that turned out to be successful. Luckily, I got my $65,000 for doing that.
That's
And from
awesome.
there, I continued. So we called it Uniquely BC, which turned into Uniquely Alberta, Uniquely Prairies, Uniquely Manitoba, Uniquely Ontario, Uniquely Slovenia, Uniquely Chile. And so you mentioned the TIAW award. So what happened is I had a magazine called Home Business Report, working for people working from home.
Mm.
Nobody had ever, like now, I wished I didn't give away my magazine.
I know.
Entrepreneur Magazine, we coined a term, my partner and I, Ted James, coined a term called homepreneur. I gave that name to Entrepreneur Magazine because it was like, I'm done. I sold the magazine for $10,000. It was like, walked away. We were too early. So we were too early with the SDGs. We were too early with the magazine. We were too early with technology in terms of the global trade shows. But that was how I became uh, not I became a really dedicated to international trade. So then I got asked to go to Southeast Asia, Africa, all these different places in the world. We were the first company in 2003 to go to Afghanistan to help the women there. And I
Wow.
still deal with Mabubi Wazizi, who's now in London. She just
Mm,
sent me an email this morning and said, Mabubi, are you coming? And this is the part about relationships. You don't know who you're going to meet. Did I know in 2003 that I would still be talking to Mabuba Wazizi from Afghanistan, who's now in the UK, right?
I know.
How did I know? You don't.
You
But if you're
don't. And
dedicated,
but that's the beauty even of what you do today. And as you know, the next issue, our whole sort of premise is about, the beauty of building and creating relationships. Why do you feel, I mean, besides from the obvious, why do you feel that creating relationships really is the core of business? I've built every single one of my relationships and businesses based on just being an
right,
authentic, true to your word, trustworthy person. And I know you
right.
have too. And I feel that people are always looking at marketing and they're looking at this, which is all extremely important. But I think if people sort of just take a step back and go back to just be a good person, show up, I'm always, what can I do for you? And everything else will come. And I feel like you had a very similar experience. So can you tell our audience why you feel that creating relationships is really key and core to businesses?
I'll give you one phrase. You only do business with people you like, period, point blank.
Mm,
You're in a community where there's only one dentist and you don't like that dentist. I'm using
mm,
dentist. I don't know why. Because we only have one dentist in our town, I guess. If you only have one dentist in the town and you don't like him, you don't have a choice. You have to go to that dentist. But as soon as that person has competition, guess what? You move, you
mm,
change. So that's what I mean by you and I are in a business of there's lots of people doing what we're doing. So why do we still have those clients that we had from 20 and 30, and in my case, 40 years ago?
mm,
It's because we formed a relationship. So we're gonna go to each other. I'll give you a concrete example. 3 weeks ago, a lady by the name of Bola Olabisi from the UK, Global Win, spelled WIIN, not WIN. I didn't know she was following me. I met her in Ghana in 2002. Then she asked me to speak in Greenwich in the UK that 2 weeks later. And I did a huge conference. Now she does similar things to me in terms of she helps entrepreneurs and women business owners, but only those that are inventors and innovators. That's what Global Win is all about. Inventors and innovators. She contacted me about 4 weeks ago and said, "Oh," and I went, "Oh, well, I didn't know you were still doing this." And she goes, "Yeah, I follow you." So immediately we started talking, and I said, "When did I speak for you in the UK?" You know what we've just done? We've just formed, I'll hold it up, press release going out. We've just formed an alliance. And
oh,
I'll
I
speak,
love that.
and I will be speaking at for her on February the 21st, a Wednesday. It's a
Wow.
global virtual on the power. I said, can we just call it the power of relationship marketing? Because that's what we did. We
That's
did not, and it was like I remembered Bola. She remembered me. She was following me. I didn't realize that. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. So
it
it's
is.
like,
So it's the way, and that's just to interject for a moment is there's a really famous saying that, people will never necessarily remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel,
that's
right?
Maya Angelou. Maya
Yes,
Angelou that did
yes,
that.
yes, thank you. Her between her and Oprah, their sayings, I didn't want to confuse the two. But, and that is so true.
Yeah,
And so you
yeah.
obviously gave her this feeling of comfort and trust and warmth. And then look how many years later she reached back out and now you formed this alliance. And I think that is just so incredible that you touch these lives.
Yeah,
And I go back to saying creating a legacy. Our life is so short, right? And,
yeah,
for
yeah,
some people, shorter than others. And I feel that just making a difference for other people is so huge, but you have to be authentic about it, which you very much are. So, what advice do you have for sort of our younger up and coming leaders and generations that are coming up, and they're very different, and they've got technology definitely down to an art and a science, and but I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect about the relationships. And people will say to me, I don't understand. I go to these networking things or whatever. And I said, well, what did you do? And they'll say, well, I went, last year I went to one event here. And I said, that's not networking. It's create the relationship. It's like you're creating a personal relationship or a bond with a pet. Like, you don't just show up and then expect wonderful things to happen. Not that it might, but it's about fostering. It's about showing up, being present. What can I do for you? You and I have had many of these conversations too. So what is the advice for our up and coming leaders?
Okay, and you hit the word authentic. So let's talk about going to a networking place. Let's talk about that for a moment. And you've been in these crowds. And this is something that I would say to people: be sincere when you go and you introduce yourself to somebody. And don't be looking over your shoulder to immediately see, oh, well, I really want to meet that person. How do I get to meet? So you lead, so you're you're creating a false interaction between the two of you. You can never do that. That shows insincere. So if you're a young person, be very deep in your wanting to know more about that person. It's like, Adrian, what is it that you really do? And I'm going to interview you next. And I got that from you. And I'm going to ask you though some of the tough questions that you're asking me. But they're not tough if you speak from your heart.
Mm,
So always speak from your heart. Don't don't assume that someone over there is going to give you something that you a job or a contract or something. It doesn't matter if you only get to talk to one person that night. Are you sincere? Like,
yes.
what's the connection, right? Because that
It is
person,
about connections, like you said, because
yes,
I think everybody knows, like, I think there's sort of an unwritten, rule, if you will.
mm,
Everybody is present and everybody has careers, or they're founders or they're entrepreneurs. So that's already known to everybody. What people want to know is who's Barbara, who's, Joan, and who are they as people? Can I trust them? If I want to become a member, if I want to buy from them or give them my business, are they going to come through for me, when the chips are down and things get tough? And I feel like there's such a disconnect there. And I want to tell people that, as being an entrepreneur in a male dominated industry, as you know, I was very alone. And it's not a good place to be. And there's so many entrepreneurs and founders that still feel that way. And I mean, for me, it was 2 decades ago. But now, with everything that's out there, I think why it is lonely if you keep yourself secluded. But there are these wonderful organizations and places to be a part of that you will be welcomed in like a family.
but again, I want to go to the core. And I say this because if you're just trying to get a connection, I do say who you meet today is someone you might work with tomorrow. But if that's the motivation for talking to this person, it's
Mm.
the wrong motivation. You want to know about, you do want to sincerely know about what are they doing? How does that work? Like, just start a real conversation because that's what's going to make a difference in the future.
And that's what sorry, I don't know if it came across incorrectly. And I agree with you with that. But what I'm saying is, founders still tell me that they still feel very alone, meaning
Yes,
that they're, sort of isolated. And so
yes.
going out to these networking events, or whatever you'd like to call them, I think the importance of it is to make connection. It's not to do business. Like I'm saying, everybody knows in the
Right,
background, everybody has a business. We talk
right.
about, a few of the events that I've come to with you. Everybody knows, and oh, what do you do? But then they want to know you, and
And
that's where
that's
I'm
it.
saying is the beauty. But for me, I was sort of saying, I don't know why people still feel lonely, because there are organizations you can go to where there are like-minded women that can help like can say, oh, you ran into that problem, this is what I did to get through it. So it's
Yeah,
sharing your experiences, right?
I totally, I would agree with you. That is the cornerstone of a good conversation is find out more about the person rather than the business. The business
Yes.
will come later.
That
Find out
that was
more.
what I was saying. That's a
Yeah,
hundred percent.
absolutely correct. So, Adrian, I want to know, oh, how long have you been living in Toronto? Oh, when did you start? Oh, that is so it. So, do you have any children? Do you have any grandchildren? Like, get into the whatever it might be. It might just start with, I love your hair. Who does it for you? I mean, but it's being honest. Like, it's not a put on. It's like, I'm sincerely interested in knowing more about that person. I,
It has to come from a very authentic place,
it
because if it
does.
doesn't, I think people see through it. And I also feel that you're not going to like it has the reason that I attend these networks, and the only reason is to get to know people. I find
Yeah,
people so incredibly interesting. I learn from everybody. It doesn't matter if you have one follower or 3 million followers. To me, I don't care what you do. I don't care who you are on social media. I'm sorry, I really don't. It's just who I am. I want, like, to your point, everybody has such an interesting story. And to me, if you really go back prior to all this wonderful technology that we're gifted with
yeah,
today, the
yeah.
way people learned was through story sharing. And
It
that to
was.
me is so incredibly valuable.
And I think another common thread is core values.
Mm,
We are part of organizations where there are similar core values. So it should be an easier conversation. On the other hand, you can go on a train and meet somebody there and you start a conversation up and it's like, oh, tell me
yeah.
more. But if you're open to listening, and that's what it's about, use use less of this and more of this, right?
Mm,
Uh, it's
absolutely.
it's the listening and it's the listening and being able to hear that person. And sometimes you come across somebody who says something and you go, oh, I can relate to that. And so you might want to share a similar experience, which is again what Grow Your Biz advisory boards are all about. It's like, how did you handle it were looking for when you were looking for a new social media person? How did you handle it when you were a cash flow problem? How did you handle it when, right? It's like it's not about telling people what to do. It's about sharing the experience, the
Mm,
values, and that's what the listening is all about. And you know what? If you've just made a new friend, that's wonderful.
that's
Then you go
bonus.
on to the next person.
Absolutely. And they always say that the best leaders in the world are the best listeners. And
Yes.
typically in meetings, they always go last because they want to take in what everybody else is saying. And so that they'll be able to address any kind of, let's just say, concern or give the proper feedback. But it also, like you said, which is very important, it makes that other person feel like they're heard. And I also
Yeah.
think that, some people are shy, and I just did a podcast the other day about somebody who's shy, who's now a powerhouse, confident, woman, empowerment all the way. And I
Yeah.
could not believe that she was shy, but she said she started off and similar to the way I started off, and that's just being curious about the other person. And it can be,
Yeah.
if you are shy, you can come to an event, whether it's virtual or in person, and have three questions. Like you said, you can talk about their family, you can ask about their hair, or you can talk about, the speaker that's going to be on, whatever the case may be. I mean, there's ways to sort of overcome that barrier of feeling anxious. I mean, I think the last three events that I came to, that you kindly invited me to, I came alone and I was good with it. And I met so many
Yeah.
great people. And, to me, it's just always an opportunity to learn, right? And I think if you look at
Yeah.
it that
You
way,
said
it's
something
different.
that was important to me. And you said, I came to that event and I was alone. That was a that was a stumbling block for me. So when you ask me what I would share to a young person, maybe they don't have the same stumbling blocks. It's usually maybe a little bit an older person that might have that. They don't want to go. I have never gone to a movie theater by myself, and I'm 72. And I
Hmm.
go, why did I? And it's like, and I think it's for me, it's the interaction I want with somebody in that theater with me because I want to talk about it after,
Ah,
right? I think,
yes.
okay, I'm hoping that's that. But then there's other things that are event. It was like I've been involved in a lot of wonderful events where you're dressed up in a gown and I don't have a mate and I go and I'm always hesitant. And then I think, okay, Barb, just do it. So sometimes to this day, you still have those inner feelings that make you uncomfortable. So
Mm,
that's what I want to try to do this year. I want to try to go to some events alone to where I don't know anybody at all. And I want to walk in as if it's like, okay, your feet are shaking and you don't feel comfortable, but I want to do it. So that's my new
I love
month
that.
resolution
I love
because, and
that.
I think
And I'm
young
going to
people
invite
are,
you to some of our events. But, and it's funny because I would never picture that or think that about you. And it's the same with something somebody said to me. They're like, "Oh, you walk in, you talked in front of all these people, and you just kill it." And I'm like, "But I was the girl that would skip class, for when they did speeches in high school. I skipped every single solitary one all 4 years, and my teachers are like, but you're very good at speaking, and I was just terrified. And then when I got into life coaching, Tony Robbins said to me, you're meant for the big stage. I'm like, yeah, no. And I told him, my story about I was always terrified. And he said, further proof that you were meant for the big stage, because what you are afraid of the most is what you want the most. And I don't know why, I was just kind of like, oh, okay. And that was, 18 years ago, but it always stuck with me. And so that it's so true. But going back to what you're saying, I don't know what that means for you because you've already been on so many big stages and whatnot.
yeah,
But, showing up alone, it was a thing for me years ago, but the more uncomfortable, and this, Barbara, growth only happens when you're uncomfortable.
yeah, yeah.
It doesn't
Well,
happen
no,
when
I
you're
think it
comfy on
was,
the couch, right?
it isn't speaking in front of a big audience. That's okay for me.
I
It's
know.
going to a gala event where
Mm,
everybody is a couple and I'm not a couple. And I walk in alone with a gown on. I want an escort. I don't care. I want an escort. I want somebody to walk in with me. That was what I was always trying to overcome. I think I have overcome it. I overcame it in November when I went to the Governor General's ball in a gown. But it's like everybody has it. Doesn't matter your age. So it's taking a look at what are I always say, first of all, look at your weaknesses and look at your strengths,
mm-hmm,
right? That's part of it. So you have to do self-awareness first. Then you take a look at career awareness or business awareness. And then you have to take a look at decision-making skills. Those are sort of the three core things. What does self-awareness mean for you? What are your barriers? What are the things that you want to work on? Doesn't matter what your age is. And it can be anything. So really taking and it's good to do this at the beginning of each year, right? Take stock. Take stock of how do I want this year to look? What is it that I want to overcome? Self awareness. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid to phone a couple of sponsors right now, and I don't know why. It's like I have the I have the spiel. What is it? What is wrong with me? And it's interesting. I have a conference coming up, right? And I'm going, oh yeah, I think I know what the barrier is there. Oh yeah, okay. So self-awareness and then business awareness. Well, what can I say to them what's the, and then it's decision making. Okay, Barb, just do it. It's a couple of big time speakers. And I think they can just say no to me,
yeah,
right? But those are areas that one always has to look at again. What
I
what
think
what
so
is
too.
this
And
year?
I don't know that for me, I don't think I can do it only once a year. I take inventory quite often. I sort of
Yeah,
have this
that's
little
good.
TLC theory, self-talk, self-love, and self-care, very similar to your self-awareness. But sometimes it's like you said, because you're sort of doing it as you're talking to me, the self-talk that we say to ourselves sometimes is not very kind. And it's fear-based sometimes it's ego-based. And I feel that I have this sort of theory that once you start talking out loud, like you said, you're like, well, okay, so they don't show up. That's okay. They say no. No might just mean not now, not today, not this year. And it's not the end of the world. I think we manifest it into something it's bigger than it is, right? And for myself as well. And anybody who says they don't run into that, I don't think is being truthful with themselves. So I think the self talk and sort of
Yeah,
positive self talk is
yeah.
so incredibly important for a lot of
But
us.
but do you think also, Adrian, I think from from for me, sometimes it goes back to how I grew up, my young age. Alcoholic parents, death, fighting, all the horrible things that went on in my life at a young age. I
Yes.
think it goes back to self-worth, right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
So that's
Oh,
a difference, right? That's
yeah.
the
Well, I
difference.
think we're talking about two different things. I feel
Yeah,
that when I talk about TLC, it's how you talk to yourself. It's not,
right,
I think sort of what you're talking about is healing your inner child, which we all have
right,
to come to
right,
terms with.
right,
Everybody has something, I don't care who you are.
right,
And
exactly.
if you haven't done that, or if it is rearing its head, a lot of times what I'll do with my clients as I coach them, it's like, is that really truthful? Like, so fear is always false evidence appearing real.
Mhm.
Where's the evidence? And they're like, well, but it could. And I'm like, that's not evidence, right? And you and I have the experience to be able to talk ourselves through that. But yes, of course the negative comes up. That's a given.
But the reason I'm saying that now is because of my age. I'm okay to say that because if I'm still trying to help the next generation, if we are true to our cause, then we have to be open about our own hurt and our own self-worth and why it's still a stumbling block. And that's why I said, I'm just getting brave enough to walk into those balls by myself with a gout, right? And it's because it can happen at any age. And it could be something that just triggers for you. Oh, I think so and so is going to go there. Oh, I don't feel comfortable with that person. And then you got to get over it. So there's a lot of things that can happen. The human race, like we want the connections, we crave those connections, but it's like how do we make sure we're true to ourselves? And so
So
if I'm
yeah, and
yeah,
so what would you say is one of your stumbling blocks? Like, what is it for you where you feel like, okay, and it kind of stops you dead in its tracks? We all have them.
I compare myself to other. I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think I'm successful enough. I don't think, right? Those are the negative thoughts that come through. And then I have to have people like you who say, Barb, I went to the TAW. Well, I went to that award. You were amazing. Well, so it's that you never you never realize what other people are maybe thinking about you. You only have those negative self-talk, negative self-talks.
Mm,
So I guess what I'm saying is every day of our life, we have to, um, we have to take pause and, and,
intentionally.
and think of the good things that have happened in our life.
Sure, absolutely. Because you're Barbara, and and you're right. The way that I see you, and the way hundreds and thousands of other people see you, is this grandiose, so wonderful woman that
Thank you.
has really trailblazed so much for entrepreneurs and founders. But you're right, everybody struggles with something, but that's what makes you even more unique and interesting, that you can say, yes, I've done all of this, but I'm still just human. I have hurt, I have been hurt, and it still creeps up on you. And
Yeah.
so that to me again goes back to the authenticity, right? And and that's one of the reasons I think you and I get along, one of the many reasons we get along so well, but you are just so incredibly authentic. And it's something that I feel is,
Mm.
oh, like innately inside all of us, but somehow we put these masks on and we
Yeah.
pretend we have to be this for that person or that for that person, when you know what, everybody just really loves Barb. Like, you don't need to be anybody. And the same go, and I'm just using it because you and I are speaking, but I feel that if we're more sort of for ourselves, okay, we've got a little fire alarm situation, which is totally fine. I feel that if everybody just acts like their true authentic self, there would be such incredible relationships that can form. But I'm sure you've run into it where people say, oh, well, I've done this and I've done that. And it's very nice to hear what people have done and, the things that they've accomplished. But, you know, you're very, and I think the word I'm looking for too is you're very humble.
Mm. Thank you. I don't, well, for me, the word that I need to continue to always have when I meet somebody new is empathy, and try to
Mm,
understand what's in her shoes or his shoes or the right. It's like
absolutely.
that's where you have to do that. Uh, a
Yeah.
little
And
bit of
empathy is,
psychology. It's
yeah, and
empathy. Like,
empathy is one of my big words. I mean, I try to lead with empathy all the time. And, it took me a long time, especially in my younger years, to sort of differentiate between sympathy and empathy. And I
right.
realized the reason being is because I am an empath. I feel everything everybody else feels. It's a good thing and it's a gift and a curse sometimes all at once. But it really is, I think, a gift, and I know that you have that as well. And that does come from pain, and that does come from things that we've endured throughout our lives. But I also sort of turn it and say how beautiful that you can feel all these things. Some of the things we don't
Mm.
want to feel, right? But it is a beautiful thing when you're sharing and you're giving back to others.
And I think that's key. So that's why I have enjoyed getting to know you, Adrian.
Thank
And
you.
thank
Me
you.
too. And I know, look, I'm looking at the time and I know we can go
Yeah,
on and on. One last question for you. And
sure.
I don't know, I've stumped absolutely everybody with this question. So I know you're going to do great and you can take a few seconds to think about it. So obviously, our brand is called I Am Unbreakable. What does it mean to you when you hear that word unbreakable? If you were to say I am unbreakable, what is that to you?
For me, it's never give up. I am unbreakable means never give up. Show your resilience, show your determination, and show your understanding of what you need to do in the next step of wherever you want to be.
I love that. The only one I couldn't stump, and I kind of knew that you were going to have something to say about it, but you nailed it. For me, it's, I've got so many mottos, but one of them is never give up and just to keep moving forward, even if it's baby
Yeah,
steps,
yeah.
even if it's at snail's pace, even if you need to take a pause and a breath, but just keep moving forward and your resilience. I love that. Thank you. Big hugs, big love to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will see you in Vancouver.